I thought it'd be fun to play a bit of a game to start out this Easter Sunday morning, and it's called Should You Stay or Should You Go? And I have a scenario for you, and you just have to decide, am I staying or am I leaving? The first is this. You're at a movie theater. You've spent gosh knows how much money on the tickets and popcorn and all that stuff. But about 30 minutes in, you realize this movie is trash. And you now have to sit through the rest of it. It is physically painful to watch. Do you stay and get your money's worth of misery, or do you go and get a better Friday night? Stay or go? Oh, mixed. Okay. Here's another one. You're at an outdoor spring sports game in Washington State for your kid. The skies suddenly open and freezing sideways rain comes at you. Half the crowd instantly gets up and goes for their cars. Do you stay shivering in the cold with your umbrella sideways to show how much you love your child? Or do you go back to your car where it's nice and warm and watch from Game Changer? I go. I'm not sticking around for that. They videotape it now. I can watch it from my phone. Scenario 3. You send a risky, emotional, maybe vulnerable text to someone, and instantly those 3 little dots appear, and you're like, oh, they're responding. And then they vanish. And they come back up, and then they vanish. Do you stay locked in on the screen in that digital void, waiting for an answer, or do you go and throw it somewhere else and come back and look at it later? Ooh, say go. Okay, all right. Yeah, those are fun. I don't know what I do. Probably scream at the phone. Hurry up. It's funny to look at these silly scenarios, but the truth is we make these calculations every day. We constantly are measuring the cost of our time and our energy against the likelihood of a good payoff. And what usually happens is when the situation looks bleak, when the wait gets too long, when the text messages go silent, our default human response is to cut our losses, to pack it up, and to go home. And the reason I bring that up today is because this exact understandable human instinct, the urge to walk away from an empty space, is exactly about the Easter story. So it's Easter Sunday. It's great to have you here. We have music and momentum and nice clothes. The day is designed for triumph and celebration. And you all probably know this story that we're going to share. It's very familiar. But on the very first Easter Sunday morning that it all happened, the story doesn't start with the celebration. If you've been joining us throughout Lent, it's the season leading up to Easter, we're in a series called All In, and we've been focusing on the less preached moments of Jesus' final journey towards the cross. They're still high stakes, but they're uncomfortable, and they kind of showcase a costly reality to following Jesus. And we realize that faith isn't a spectator sport. It invites us to engage it with our head and with our heart and with our hands. And now we come to the Easter story, and we read of this experience on this very first Easter Sunday that seems like this whole journey has been leading up to this very anticlimactic moment with one woman, Mary Magdalene, and she's living in this tension of, should I stay or should I go? So here's the backstory. In case you've never heard the story before, Jesus died on a cross. Mary was there. She witnessed the whole thing. When it was time to take Jesus down, she was there, and she watched. She watched him get wrapped in linens. She watched his body be placed in a tomb. She watched a giant stone cover the entrance. Game over. Time to go home. And I wonder, why does all this focus on Mary in this moment? She's not talked about a lot in the rest of scriptures, but Mary wasn't just this huge fan of Jesus. Historically, she's been misidentified as a repentant prostitute, but this is not that Mary. The Gospels describe her as a devoted disciple who financially supported Jesus' ministry, along with some other women after they were healed. And her name Magdalene is not her last name. It usually means she came from a town called Magdala in the Sea of Galilee. And this was a thriving, prosperous city known for commerce, high religious culture, and a rebellious attitude towards Rome. So Mary Magdalene probably believed that she was bankrolling a rebellion. And she was, just not the kind that I think she was thinking or hoping for. And here's where we pick up on the story. It says, early on that first day of the week, this is after Mary had gone home, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went back to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Mary Magdalene comes back to the tomb before the sun has come up. The Gospel of Mark says that she's gone there with some other women to anoint Jesus' body. And they're on their way, and they're wondering kind of how they're going to move this giant stone that they watched get put into place. But they get there, and they notice the stone is gone. And so she goes back and she tells the guys. And Peter and John sprint back to the tomb. And John, who's writing this, makes sure he mentions that he beat Peter there, which is a weird flex, but all right, dude. And they walk in, and he also said, like, the one that Jesus loved. Okay, we get it. You're his favorite. But they walk in, and they see the strips of linen lying there. They see the empty space. And we get to verse 10, and it might be one of the most painfully relatable verses in the Bible. They see the empty tomb, and what do? They start a worship service. They sing hallelujah. No, they don't. They don't do any of that. This is what it says. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. They just went home. Why? Maybe they saw the empty tomb and maybe they were hoping for a miracle and it didn't happen. Or maybe they were hoping to find some answers to this mystery, but they got none of that. First he died, now his body's gone, and any hope that they might have felt or any agency that they felt they had in doing anything about this situation was over. And their pragmatism takes over. They had families. They had fishing boats and fishing careers to get back to. Their grief was probably exhausting, and eventually they just had to go make breakfast and pay their bills and get back to their routine. And they did the most logical thing that you can do when you're staring at a dead end. You move on. And it would be easy to judge them here. And we think, how could you just walk away? Didn't you know that Jesus was risen? No, they didn't. Remember, first time. Their reaction is incredibly relatable, I think, to us today in 2026. Peter and John, they didn't leave because they suddenly decided that God wasn't real. They left because following Jesus had become painful. The outcome didn't match their theology. They felt that they have been entirely let down by their beliefs. Sociologists tell us that in the last 25 years, 40 million Americans have stopped coming to church in America. It's the largest religious shift in our nation's history. And when you ask people why they went back home, their answers sound a lot like maybe what the disciples were feeling on that Sunday morning. Some of us have gone back home because of the pain of unanswered prayers. We sat in a hospital room. We prayed for our marriage. We begged for a breakthrough, and all we got was an empty, silent space. And just like the disciples, when the silence and the painful season of our lives stretches a bit too long, we eventually assume God is probably gone from this situation or isn't going to do anything about it. And so we pack up our bags and our hopes, and we protect our hearts. Some of us have chosen to go home because we are disillusioned with the institution of church. The disciples had just watched one of their own betray Jesus, and the rest of their leadership was scattering. Today, millions of people are walking away not because they've lost their faith in Jesus necessarily, but because they've been so deeply hurt by his followers. Researcher David Kinnaman points out that many people are leaving the church not because they've lost their faith, but because they're trying to save it. They're tired of the hypocrisy and the politics and the judgment, and so they just go home. And for some of us, our trip home has just been a slow drift. There's no massive crisis. There's no blow up. We just got busy. Maybe we moved to a new city. The kids had some sports events on Sunday mornings, and over time, we've just casually drifted back into our normal routines. We've become the masters of moving on. And when God doesn't show up the way we script it, our default human response is to settle into that pragmatism, because waiting for God to show up is a little bit too vulnerable. And so we check out and we go home. And then we hit verse 11 in this story, and there's a pivot. It says, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying, and she wept. She bent over to look in the tomb, and she saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And they asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They've taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they've put him.' The men left, but Mary stayed. Why? I think it's not because she had better theology. It's not because she suddenly remembered some prophecy from the ancient times and was expecting a miracle. If you look at the text, she looks in, she sees the angels sitting there. She isn't awestruck. She doesn't fall on her face in worship. She's just annoyed. She says, "They've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they put him." She still thinks he's dead. She's totally confused, and she's there, though, because she loved him. She stayed because he meant the world to her. She stayed because she wasn't going to let the difficulty of a situation affect her all-in commitment. And so the story continues. Verse 14. "At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not realize it was Jesus. He asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for?' Thinking that he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you put him, and I will go get him.'" And just think about the physics of that for a second. Like, there's this grieving, exhausted woman who is physically going to pick up the dead weight of a body and carry the man all back to the tomb by herself. She's committed in this. She doesn't know how she's going to do it. She just knows she cannot walk away from it. And that's exactly what it looks like to be all in faith. It's a willingness to shoulder the weight of any dead hope that you have to stay close to Jesus. In a culture that trains us to immediately abandon anything that we get or anything that's difficult, to ghost a relationship, to quit a job, to change a church, the second that we feel uncomfortable, Mary does the most countercultural thing possible. She stays in the empty space. And I believe that there are people in the room right now that need to hear this, that your presence in the pain is a profound act of worship. You might be sitting in a painful season right now. You're looking at a marriage or a diagnosis or a bank account, and it looks like a graveyard. You don't have the answers. The theology feels fragile. You have no more hallelujahs to give today. But you walk through the door of our church anyway, and today at least you've stayed. And Easter starts with the God who honors the people who stay and refuse to go home. So Mary's standing in the cemetery. She's exhausted. She has this thick fog of grief. She's talking to a man she genuinely believes is the landscaper. And we get to verse 16, and it's a beautiful verse. Jesus doesn't perform some miracle to show who he is. He doesn't give her a theological discourse on the nature of the glorified body. He just says one word. He says her name. Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out, "Teacher." And I want you to think about the wildness of this moment. The resurrection is the single most massive cosmic event in human history. Death is defeated, the veil is torn, the curse is broken, and if you or I were Jesus, we'd probably march our butts back to Pilate and be like, "I told you so." But he doesn't. The Savior of the world, in his very first moments out of the grave, goes to his friend. He walks up behind a broken and weeping woman, and he comforts her. He doesn't announce the resurrection to the crowd yet. He announces it to a mourner who refuses to leave. And this is why we stay. This is why we don't pack up and go home when it just makes sense to. Because what if God is still here? What if he calls my name? What if it is all going to work out? And so Jesus becomes a voice in your life. He didn't just rise from the dead for the world. He rose for Mary, and he rose for you, and he rose for me. And God didn't bring you into this room this morning just to give you some facts to believe. He brought you in here to call your name in the middle of whatever space that you're in and that you're standing in. So stick around and don't leave this moment too quickly. And so Mary hears the name. The fog kind of lifts, her grief breaks. She cries out, "Teacher," and you can imagine the scene. She's probably throwing her arms around him. She has her Savior back. The nightmare she's just lived through is over. In her mind, everything is finally going to go back to normal. And just going back to the way things were is comforting. But then Jesus says something kind of jarring. It's the climax of this story, and it goes completely against everything I've just said about, hey, stick around and find out. It's better to stay than go. Jesus says this, "Don't hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them." It sounds almost harsh, a little bit. Mary finally gets the one thing that she's been weeping over fixed. And Jesus' immediate response is to say, hey, you need to go now. Why? And here's where I'm landing on this one. And Marvel movies kind of did it in for our family. So Marvel movies, at the end of the credits, there's always something you stick around for because there's an extra scene. Growing up, my kids thought every movie had that. I'm like, no, sorry. But before its time was Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Have you ever seen that movie? You get to the end of the credits and Ferris Bueller kind of comes out of the bathroom and he's like, "You're still here? The movie's over. Go home." Go back and watch it. Highly recommend. Anyway, this is the vibe that I'm getting from this moment. Faith isn't just about staying. It's about going too. And depending upon how you're encountering Jesus today or tomorrow helps you answer that question, should I stay or should I go? Are you waiting around for God to show up? Stay. Has he already shown up for you? Okay, then it's time to go. Mary isn't being asked to go like Peter and John did. Peter and John just went home. Mary is told to leave because she did stick around and she found out that she can't hold on to what was. It was time to go. Any past version of Jesus is now completely different. And while she's holding on to something so amazing, Jesus is kind of saying, Mary, we aren't going backwards. Everything is new now. You can't keep me here in the garden for yourself. And this is the ultimate tension of an all-in faith. It's so tempting to treat our faith in Jesus like Mary treated this moment. We want Jesus and we want to hold on to him like a cute little Jesus in your pocket. It's private, it's comforting, it's predictable. It makes us feel safe. But Jesus refuses to be the pacifier. The moment that he heals your hearts, he calls you out to go on mission. And he told Mary that you have to let go of this moment. You have to leave the garden. You have to go and tell the others. So what happens is we get this learning that your staying is for your healing, but your going is for their hope. Verse 18, Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. In a single morning, Mary goes from mourning the deepest loss of her life to going down in all of history as the apostle to the apostles. She becomes the very first preacher of the gospel, not because she had a seminary degree, not because she paid a lot of money into his ministry. She stayed simply and encountered the risen Christ, and because of that, Jesus told her where to go. Easter is the story of a God who meets us in the graveyards, calls our name, and sends us back out. Not to go home, but to go and. And if we look at scripture, there's actually a few kinds of go ands that Jesus gives to his followers. The first is go and tell. This is this story. The call to speak openly about our faith. Jesus is asking you to stop keeping your beliefs private. He's asking you to go to your family members, to your friends, to your coworkers, and tell them how God has changed your life. There's also a call to go and sin no more. This is in John 8. There's a woman caught in adultery, and Jesus redeems her, but he says, neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave the life of sin. This is leave the life of sin. This is a call to immediately leave some destructive behaviors. You're being called to physically walk away from some bad habits, some addictions, or some relationships that are violating God's commands and what he has for you. And so there's a call to start making daily practical choices to honor him different. There's another call. Go and sell everything. This one's hard. Go and sell. In Mark 10, Jesus is talking to a rich young man. He says, hey, go and sell everything you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and then come and follow me. This is a call to give up a valuing of money and possessions and career goals, so much so that they're more important than God, to give that up and to follow God instead. He's asking us to literally part with our wealth or the things that make us feel secure so that we can fully trust and lean into him. There's another call for relational repair. Go and be reconciled. In Matthew 5:24, Jesus is saying, hey, if you have an issue with somebody that you care about, or really anyone in general, and you're at church, why don't you just go ahead and leave that gift there at the altar? First go and be reconciled to them, and then come back and give your gift. This is a call to fix a broken relationship. Jesus is saying that making peace with another person is more urgent than attending a church service. He's asking you to go and make that phone call, apologize, offer forgiveness to that specific person that you have conflict with. And there's a final call. This is to tangible compassion. Go and do likewise. When Jesus talks about being a good neighbor in Luke 10 to those around us, despite who they are, despite where they came from, despite what they believe, this is a call to physically care for their needs. Instead of just studying the Bible and agreeing with the sermon, Jesus is asking you to spend your time, your energy, and your money to feed and to clothe and assist people in our community who are suffering. Go and do likewise. And now I'm aware that we're all in different places in this room. Not everyone is in the same place when it comes to faith, but I think I can confidently say that at least each and every one of us has these two specific challenges in front of us: stay or go. And maybe you're someone who needs to stay. You've been running. You're exhausted. You're deeply frustrated with the silence of God. You're looking at the situations of your life, and all you see are empty spaces. And your instinct is to pack it up and to protect your heart and to retreat. And the invitation for you today is to stay, to stop retreating. I'm challenging you to stubbornly stand in that empty space. Bring your doubts, bring your unresolved grief, bring all that stuff. Don't rush to the exit just because it's difficult and dark. The hope of the resurrection is for those that refuse to leave. So hang on and wait for him to call your name. But maybe you feel the call to go. You've had your encounter. You know the Lord. You've heard him call your name. And if you're honest, you've just been holding on to some past version of your faith. Now, you've treated Jesus too much like a comforting pillow, and you just want to stay there where it's safe, where you can just be with him, where it's predictable. But Jesus is looking at you today and saying, do not hold on to me any longer. Now is the time for you to see that I am doing a new thing. So go. Step back into your messy life. Go and tell someone that the grave is empty by what you say and by what you do. Which is your call today? Stay or go? Are you staying to hear your name, or are you going to share his? And so I have 3 questions for you to consider this week. The first is for your head, is what makes faith in Jesus so difficult for you? There's a lot of questions that we have, and that's okay to ask them. The second is for your heart. What empty spaces are you rushing to leave because they are uncomfortable? And the third question is for your hands, is what is Jesus calling you to go and do?